know what I love about it? It's the first race, and you get to kind of get the cobwebs off and get back in the groove of things, but it's also fun. I think you go into this race, and if you don't go in this race with attitude, I'm going to have fun, then you're going to have a miserable night. But you can, or day, you're going to have a lot of fun in this race, I think.
Well, Jeff, everybody's saying that to run the Clash before the 500 has never been more important than it is this year. Why?
Yeah, I mean, it's always an exciting time of year to get on track and be in that first race. And like you say, knock the rust or the cobwebs off. But I'm hearing a buzz out there about some of the changes that are happening with like ride heights and different things, that being in this race is bigger and more important than it's ever been in the history. And those teams that are in it are excited to be in it. We've heard at times where they were like a little nervous. I don't want to tear this race car up. Not this race, not this year.
Well, we're excited to bring it to you. Let's get down to that garage area. That's where it's all happening. Matt Yoakum.
Mike, Happy New Year. And over the past years, it's always been the same feel here in the garage area. Very calm, but a heightened sense of urgency due to the new ride height rules. In the past, year after year, they'd utilize the same setup. But now Martin Truex Jr. and Cole Pearn, they're going to try to creep up on the race-winning, what they're hoping to be a race-winning setup this weekend and next. They're going to start out, make a couple short runs here with the 78 car, and then when this session ends, they're going to take what they've learned, carry it over to their 500 car, and continue on with that path. In fact, if you go through the history books, you'll find that the last guy who scored his first Premier Cup Series championship followed that up with a win in the Great American Race back in 2000. Dale Jarrett, Hall of Famer. Mike?
Thanks, Matt. Cars rolling out to pit road for Clash, the first of 3 practice sessions today. Welcome back to Daytona International Speedway, where this first practice lasting 1 hour and 20 minutes is only for the 17 drivers that will compete in tomorrow's Clash on FS1. It was a foggy morning here in Daytona Beach, but the temperature quickly climbed into the 70s. Light breeze out of the southeast, track temp 92. We're going to see a lot more sun than shade today. Down to the garage, Vince Welch.
Well, there's no driver or team more thankful to see the calendar flip to 2018 than Joey Logano. Logano won the Clash here at Daytona a year ago, but not much else went right for this 22 team. They missed the playoffs, and crew chief Todd Gordon told me in the offseason they had to reevaluate everything they did, from the way they built the cars, the way they set them up, to the way Logano drove them. They're very excited for a new season. Logano hasn't been in the car since Homestead, said he didn't do any testing. He was looking forward to getting out there and seeing what they got for 2018. Larry?
Well, Vince, the guys in the booth were talking about the no ride height rule. They just drop these cars down. Now, that helps the straightaway speed, but it hurts the downforce. And you look at the last couple of trips here to Daytona with the loss of grip in this racetrack, teams are talking about getting their cars to handle. I think it's going to be a fine line in this practice between straightaway speed and getting these cars to drive good.
Thanks, Larry. Let's have a look at, before the cars rolled off, some of these new side skirts, a thinner material, and new rules on ride heights and how they deploy and new spoiler rules.
Yeah, well, those side skirts were made out of metal. Now they're made out of a composite. And the thought is, and the theory is, and it should be right, that they won't flare out like what we saw at the end of last year. We saw a lot of those things with wings sticking out on the side of them. So they think this new composite material, it'll drag the ground, but it won't flare out like the metal did.
And you could see as Brad Keselowski was going into turn 3 down the back straightaway, that's something you're going to see much different this time around at Daytona, is the car is so low because of the no ride heights, even on the straightaway. They used to travel through the corners when they compressed into the banking, but now on the straightaways, those cars are way down. Should see some higher straightaway speeds because of it.
And Jeff, do you just think back to here over the years, where do the cars wreck the most? Going down the back straightaway, you know, going into turn 3. That's because that's where the car was raised up a little bit, off the ground a little bit. Now that car's going to be solid as a rock. I believe you'll be able to bump a little, do a little more bump drafting. I think the cars will handle better because they're in one spot all the time.
Well, and the bump drafting is going to be really unique to watch this year because the new Camaro ZL1, it has a point to it. We talked about last year the new Toyota, how it had these horns, and we were worried about how they were going to bump draft. the Ford, you know, is a body that's been in the series for a couple years now, so I don't see any big changes there. But with that new Camaro, I think that when they start getting into pushing, they're going to have a tough time lining up those bumpers.
Yeah, just look at the back of the 31, Ryan Newman there. That rear bumper, I swear it looks like it's about 6 inches off the ground, and we've never seen that down here before. That thing is low in the back. And it goes, look what Newman just ran. He ran a 46.74, 192 miles an hour.
By himself, that's not even drafting yet. Wait till they start drafting.
And I think last year down here, speeds were around 190, 191 miles an hour, so we're already a little bit quicker.
He did catch a sniff of a draft anyway.
Well, it doesn't take much.
And if you're wondering at home, why this is the clash practice, they should be drafting. I heard a lot of teams talking about they want to go out and find out what this new ride height rule is going to do for their heights for their 500 qualifying cars. So some of them will do single car runs here at the beginning of practice, and then you'll probably start to see them get into the packs.
So last year, with a minimum height when the cars were stopped, a minimum clearance under the car, when they went out and got up to speed, the car would settle down on its springs. It would smash those side skirts down and flare them out. Now, if the car is starting pretty much on the ground, there's no compression left to flare those skirts out. At least that is the hope. As here's Mr. Lonely, Jimmy Johnson, single car run.
Of course, Chad Knaus, no surprise here. But let's remember, here at Daytona, they typically didn't want those skirts to flare. It was when we got to the downforce tracks like Vegas and Phoenix and other tracks that we're going to go to, you know, after we leave Daytona. But here, I believe they're going to want it on the ground, but I don't think they're going to want those to flare out. And that's what I think makes it so fun and unique, is that you say, well, they can't do it. They're having trouble not getting them to flare. Oh, they know how to make them flare and how not to.
There are 4 drivers in the clash with new teams, or at least with new numbers, led by Chase Elliott, who takes the number 9 that his dad made famous, and now applies it onto his Hendrick Chevrolet.
Yeah, you know, Mike, it's a number, and you say, well, big deal. It's same car, same, it's just a different number. But I'm telling you, there's a comfort zone a driver has. I know with Chase, he drove Jeff's car. That was a 24 car, and now I think he's feels like this is my car. It's his dad's number. It's a number he won with, and it's a number that Chase had won with. I just believe it puts him in a comfort zone that he wasn't in the past.
He's hoping to make this chain a very big deal. I think he will. Ryan Newman paces the early minutes of clash practice. Clash practice rolls on. Ryan Newman, Chase Elliott quickest. 17 drivers will contest the clash tomorrow afternoon on FS1, including 2 rookies. Ryan Blaney in the Penske number 12. He's now the 3rd driver in the Penske operation, and a rookie in the clash. Eric Jones is the other rookie for Joe Gibbs Racing in a Toyota.
I just think it's going to be such a fun year, a great start to the year for sure. With these young drivers trying to make a name for themselves, trying to dethrone those guys that have been here for a while, the Martin Truexes and the Harvicks and so forth. This is going to be fun to watch.
And I think what makes this story so unique this year is the quality of race cars that they'll be driving. They have the opportunity to not just bring their youthful approach and their talent, but they have a great race team behind them. That's huge.
I think, Jeff, the biggest thing is, in the past, Mike, you've seen this, we'd have 1 or 2 rookies that would show up down here every year. And that was a couple of guys, you know. We got a whole field full of them. There's about 15 of them.
Well, Ryan Blaney is a star already. He's a winner for the Wood Brothers.
He's already won.
And he is a star of social media. The other morning, he put a video up on Twitter that said, always wanted a stream in the front yard, and it had rained about 2 inches in Mooresville. Larry Mack's house about floated into Lake Norman, and boy, he had a stream in the front yard. But he shares with the fans, and probably does it better than just about anybody else in Cup racing.
He gets it.
Yep. Vince?
Well, as we take a look at the 48 of Jimmy Johnson, he has just come in giving Chad Knaus a little bit of feedback on how the car was handling. They went out for that first single car run, and Chad Knaus told him, we just want to get a feel for it, see how it drives, come back in, get some readings. But Jimmy Johnson's one comment, Man, it's going to be fast. We're hearing that a lot down here.
I believe that, Vince. They are going to be fast.
And that's going to be so crucial, is how do you get the car to not just be fast but drive good? I think that's going to be a real challenge. I was watching Ryan Blaney just running by himself coming off of turn 4. You could see the car sort of moving around with the back end down so much. Think about what's going to happen when they get into a draft in that turbulent air.
Well, I think the car, in theory, should drive better because it's not going through and it's not moving. It's locked down in one position, unlike in the past where, like we said, the car come a little on the straightaway and then go back down a little bit in the turns. The car should be more consistent. So from a feel point of view, from a driver's point of view, I think it'll drive better. But you put those little weak springs in the back and you get that back end down and somebody sticks their nose up on the back of your car, hello.
Well, let's talk a little about how drivers are eligible for the Clash. As we see Ricky Stenhouse, who picked up a very popular win here last 4th of July. That's how he did it. There was the margin. Now, all the drivers who made the playoffs last year, Stenhouse did with 2 wins, they're eligible for the Clash. Aside from that, you must have been a full-time series driver in 2017, and then the field includes pole winners from last year and previous winners of the Clash and previous Daytona 500 pole winners, as long as they competed in the series full-time last year. So 17 drivers are here. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is eligible. Matt Kenseth is eligible, and so is Danica Patrick. And of those 3, only Patrick will compete here this week. The team he's driving for said they could not put a second car together in time for the Clash, and so she is not entered. So 17 of the 20 eligible drivers will be on track in this practice and in the race tomorrow.
What was funny about that 4th of July race that Ricky won, he was the only guy with a win in the top 15, I think. If he hadn't won that race, somebody else would have gotten a win that day that would have moved them into the championship battle. So he spoiled a lot of guys' days by winning that race.
Well, and when we talk about the Toyota dominance in the regular season, let's talk about the Ford dominance when it comes to restrictor plate races in the last couple of years. They have owned these places.
And I think we're going to be talking about that a lot this week. Matt?
Mike, when we go to Daytona and Talladega, we always see folks that show up just for the 4 plate races every year. They're the guys that are in charge of the speedway cars. Aero magicians, so to speak. And one of those guys is Kevin Pennell, the gentleman with the beard. He's in charge of the speedway program at Stewart-Haas Racing. Longtime road member. He's been a part of the Dale Earnhardt teams through the years, Dale Jr. But now he's in charge of this program, and you can really see how Stewart-Haas has started to really focus on small different areas, looking for more success, and also talking about other things we're working on. As far as the driver goes, yes, we're trying to run through different ride height rules and check clearances, but for Kevin Harvick, he also swapped out his visor. It's somewhat of a lightly tinted shield. Harvick was complaining he was having a difficult time getting his eyes to focus because of the clouds. It's the little things.
It is. Driver comfort. Got to get all that right before they drop the green flag. But you know what, Mike? Aero is so complicated these days. It's not just the body that we look at. It's not all what you see, the surface. So much goes on underneath these cars these days that we kind of were aware of, but we never did anything about. Now they just, every aspect of that car, they look at as an aero platform.
Now, guys, as I watch Austin Dillon run this lap, he was up high in 3 and 4, getting as much momentum to the line, and now he's on the bottom. To me, this is a mock qualifying run to give them information for their 500 car in the next practice that's going to be coming up.
Oh, good point. There is no qualifying for this race. The starting positions, by tradition, have been determined by a draw.
Baby's going somewhere. It's 189, 190 mile an hour down the back.
Barely hear those RPMs come down a little bit off the turn 4. That's wind and the friction of the steering wheel being turned in the corner.
It's all about 2 mile an hour difference in the turn and on the straightaway, but that's still a pretty fast lap.
Practice for the Clash rolls on in Daytona. Ryan Newman, Chase Elliott, Austin Dillon, and Jimmy Johnson have the 4 fastest practice speeds so far, followed by Kevin Harvick's Ford. Larry?
You know, when you look at the rear of these race cars, the rear spoiler, it contributes to one of the bigger things about aerodynamics, drag and downforce. Last year here at Daytona and Talladega, the rear spoiler was 53 inches wide by 4.5 inches tall. NASCAR knew the straightaway speeds were going to be up, so they added a 1/2 inch of spoiler to the top, making it 53 by 5. Yeah, that hurts the drag, but it does help the downforce, the drivability of the car.
And you know, Larry, if you go back to last year, I think we mentioned a number of times that we felt like the cars were a little light on spoiler, even last year, the rules they had.
Back down to the garage, and Matt.
Mike, when you see the cars on the racetrack, they remind me of maybe like a lead sled, a 49 or a 50 Mercury, just how they're dragging in the back. And talking about ride quality for the driver, any different than last year, or is it rougher?
It's a little rougher. This car is so low to the ground. Slightly. I really wish we could go and draft a little bit. I think a lot of guys are just, the cars are so low, everybody's rubbing in side skirts and rubbing parts and pieces of the car. So just trying to get all that clearance properly and make sure that we don't miss anything, because speeds are going to pick up a lot when you draft, so we'll see.
For your fans, though, and your fan base, everyone's excited to see the number 9 back in the Elliott family.
Yeah, me too. I don't think anybody's more excited than I am, to be honest with you. It's, I don't know, I just look at this car and I look at that number and it just fits. It just fits me and it looks right. It's what I've always seen forever racing. So definitely back home with the right number on the side of my car, and it sure looks good on that scoring pylon for sure, too.
Mike?
Elliott in the number 9. Now the 24 that Jeff Gordon made famous did not go away. We'll see it later in the week, tomorrow.
And
with,
I'm really
William Byron.
I think it's awesome for Chase. I think that it probably should have happened when he first came into the Cup Series, and there are different reasons why Rick Hendrick wanted to keep that 24 there and put Chase in it. But look at this, the history of the 9 and the Elliott family.
Casey Kane with that Gillette Evernham team, 11 wins. Marcus Ambrose picked up 2 wins in the 9 for the Aussie. And then Donald Thomas and his brother Herb back in the early days of NASCAR. Each picked up a win. Herb, Hall of Famer, multi-champion. All going to victory lane in the 9. Let's see, how many drivers have won in the 24? That would be 1.
1.
So far.
Somebody else is going to win in the 24.
That's
it's going to
okay.
happen. But Dita, I want you to talk about, you had several different numbers.
Yeah.
17 was, I know what you were kind of into or passionate about. How much does that matter to you? I only had one number in the Cup Series, and it just, like, I had no connection to it prior to the Cup Series, but once it became my number and we started winning, then all of a sudden I couldn't imagine being in anything else. And you heard him talk about what that means to him personally and the family, and I think there's going to be a little extra incentive of what he's doing on the track because of it.
I think it's family tradition. He's just carrying on a family tradition. His dad started that tradition. I think it's important to keep that number in the family.
Jamie McMurray for Chip Ganassi in the number 1. Here's what McMurray said after his first run.
It drove pretty normal though. You didn't notice like anything absolutely different. The only thing that stuck out to me that I thought was going to be way better was I felt like that it would swing the back on the entry to everywhere that I put a little bit of wheel into it, like in the tri-oval entry to both ends. It felt like it was swinging the back more than I remember, and I thought that was going to feel better.
Yeah, there's the transitions here at Daytona. These are pretty flat straightaways, and then you get into, 31-degree banking, I believe. That transition from the flat straightaway into the banking is pretty significant, and so you always, especially in the draft, get a little bit of a light feeling. So I think what Jamie was saying is with the car being down in the back, he thought that was going to improve that transition, but it doesn't sound like it did. One thing I'm noticing is the way this car is dog tracking the opposite direction that you would really want it to. That gets the spoiler out of the air in the corners and gives them a little speed. I'm not so sure that's what they're going to want in the draft.
She's towed in a little bit, that's for sure.
We met with NASCAR this morning about rules and changes and things, and we've got one little topic we're going to update for you after the break. We were slightly misinformed. Well, we were slightly jumping the gun. Oh, we'll explain in a minute.
We heard, we just weren't listening.
Welcome back to Clash Practice. Kyle Larson now fastest. Get a look behind the rear wheel at how that quarter panel is almost dragging the ground on Kyle Busch's car. That is close. Now, we've talked a lot about skirts and how NASCAR's new rule for the skirts is intended to combat the flaring out on the intermediate tracks, Larry.
Yeah, that's going to start next week or in 2 weeks at Atlanta Motor Speedway when we go there at our first downforce track. But that's one reason, Mike, I think so many of these teams are making these single car runs. Jeff and DW talked about getting the height of the splitter. It's also getting those skirts to seal to the ground, because when you seal them, not have them bottoming out, just seal them, that's free downforce, and it actually helps the drag of the race car.
Larry, I got a question for you. You know, with the new Chevy Camaro coming into the series this year, I kind of anticipated maybe this car having a little extra drag. So when we got here to Daytona, it might handle well, but maybe not. It doesn't quite have the straight line speed. But we're seeing these cars right now, you know, all the ones up top 5 are Chevrolets right now. Are we going to continue to see that throughout the whole weekend?
Well, I do look at some of these numbers, Jeff, and I think we suspect that maybe some of them got a little bit of a help. But I use a Toyota Camry as a great example. If you look back last year, they maybe didn't have that blazing speed by themselves. When they dropped that green flag for the race and you were looking for that downforce, they went to the front. So I think, you know, there's no free lunch in aero. If you gain downforce, you're going to hurt the drag.
And Larry, you know, you'd love to have a car with zero drag, zero everything for qualifying. But, buddy, when you get out there amongst them in a pack of cars, you're going to want a little downforce on that car if you're going to be able to stay in the throttle.
And I think as hot as it's going to be here, absolutely, a little softer tire with a little more grip in the beginning. I think all the things are stacking up. The guy that goes to victory lane in about 8 days is going to talk about how good his car drove.
Jimmy Johnson back out for another run. Here's Vince.
And you see on the left-hand side of the screen, currently 3rd on the speed chart. A big change for this 48 team this season. A new car chief, longtime car chief Ron Malik has taken a different position within the organization, and Jesse Saunders has taken over as car chief, 32 years old, from Wisconsin. He's been with Hendrick Motorsports since 2014, was the underneath mechanic on the 48 prior to taking over the car chief role. But Ron Malik had been with Jimmy Johnson as part of his crew, if you will, since even before they came to the NASCAR scene. So Jesse Saunders, a little bit shy. He's getting a little television time, but an important role on this 48
Getting
team.
a little hazing from his teammates. And Ron Malik's, he's gone racing. He's been racing SCCA in the major series and having some fun.
You know, when you've been on the road as long as Ron was and a crucial part of this 48 team, taking a step back from traveling, you know, is what happens at this stage in your life in that part of your career. But I don't get that mixed up. I think he's still doing a lot back at the shop that's contributing to the success of Hendrick and this 48 team.
But Jeff, you know this, Mike, you do too. When they didn't end the season like they wanted to. I mean, they didn't have the performance we expected out of that 48 team. If you don't change something, whether it's the crew chief, the car chief, you got to change something, or else you're saying we're okay with where we were. This means that we didn't like where we were, and we're going to revamp and try something different.
Well, one big change for all these Chevrolet teams is this Camaro body. Chevrolet had not won a plate race since the summer of 2015 when Dale Jr. won here. And the SS was made in Australia and imported here, but that Holden plant, part of GM, is shuttered. They're not building cars in Australia anymore. There's no more Chevy SS. Plus, the success of the Toyota Camry body last year led Chevrolet to say, we need something new and something more like the Toyota that is designed to optimize today's aero rules.
Yeah, and we talked about Jimmy Johnson and not having a great season last year, but let's talk about the clash. I mean, if you want to come into a season and build some momentum and some confidence, I don't know if this is the race that Jimmy Johnson's looking for. He has DNF'd, I believe, the last 6 years in a row. So they're not big fans of this race so far, but they're going to want to have a good race car, and I think they're putting more effort into that.
Well, if you want to have a great speed weeks, you win the Clash, you win your qualifying race, and you win the Daytona 500. That's when you walk out of here with your chest sticking way out. Well, that doesn't happen very often.
That's a Denny Hamlin kind of plan. He's done that. And in 2016, in the Clash,
remember, he dropped to the back, trying to play it safe, and unfortunately somebody, I believe, cut a tire and ended up taking out the right side of that car.
What we saw down here last year, if you didn't have body damage, if your car wasn't beat all the, look at the side of this thing. If your car didn't look like that, you didn't run very good.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't hold him back, that damage. Might want to do that again. Nobody's had more success down here in Speed Weeks that's active as an active driver. I think 7 Speed Week wins that Denny Hamlin has had. So talk about confidence. He has a lot of confidence here at this track.
I think he won the Clash as a rookie.
He did.
Kyle Larson now quickest ahead of Newman, Johnson, and Elliott.
There's your buddy Cole Pern.
My man.
Long story short, you're probably fine. I gotta go. Sorry, man.
No worries, we're not late.
Oh, funny.
Go.
There he is.
Nice shoes.
Yeah, those are cool. Let's do this. Come on.
Changing your oil after 3,000 miles?
Kevin Harvick.
If you'd used Mobil 1 annual protection, you wouldn't have to. It protects your engine for 1 year with just 1 oil change.
Don't change your oil. Mobil 1 annual protection.
Money is like life. You have to decide how to get the most from it. So we made you some simple, free tools to help you see how what you do today will affect your tomorrow. Which means you can make smart choices about how to spend your money and your life.
You eat well and take the highest stostatin you can to lower your LDL bad cholesterol, but still aren't getting where you need to be. It can be a real struggle. Now there's a different way to reduce LDL and get on the path to dramatically lower numbers with Repatha. Repatha works differently from your statin to help clear LDL. When taken every 2 weeks, Repatha plus the highest dose statin drove down LDL on average.
How about that grass in they call it the ball field. I've always called it the tri-oval. It is 2 different types of grass planted and lined out and trimmed specially to represent the Firebird 1. That was a GM styling exercise, a car of tomorrow that now sits atop the Harley Earl Trophy.
You can call it whatever you want to, but when you get in it, I call it trouble.
Oh, the grass.
I don't care how they cut it. Look at that. Isn't that amazing?
It's so impressive.
That is. I love that.
So
Very sharp.
impressive.
That's so fun.
Yep.
And symbolic.
Yep.
Yeah, is there a no grass rule up until the Daytona 500?
We'll write one.
You can pass in the grass. Some places.
Ryan Blaney, the Fords, right now shut out of the top half dozen spots, which are all bow ties. The blue ovals, 7th, 10th, 11th, 13th being Blaney, 14th and 16th.
And say I go back to talking about Chevy versus Ford, Toyota last year. If you look at the success of the Fords on the restrictor plate tracks and actually some of the struggles they had at the downforce tracks, that tells me, I believe the Fords have, of course they've always had great power with the Roush Yates engines. I believe they have less drag is why they've been so fast at these restrictor plate tracks the last couple of years.
I think you're on to something, Jeff. Remember that the Fusion is the oldest body in NASCAR now. When it debuted, we had a big rear blade. We had a whole different aero package. So now you have this relatively low downforce body, and you have a small 5-inch spoiler like we have now. I think you could be right.
Well, I think you got also, if you're the Ford guys, you got to say, look, we're having an awful lot of success with what we've got.
Absolutely. Ford's won the last 7 plate races that paid points toward the NASCAR Cup, and Joey Logano won the Clash last year.
So, you know, when I think about Keselowski and how he runs, I think about Stenhouse, how he runs, and Joey, how he's run. I mean, these Fords, when they get in a race, they got the right package. It freaks me out, that rear bumper.
I know, it's so low to the ground. I think that when they get in the draft, you might see that rear bumper drag in the ground.
Look at that thing. I mean, that's going to hit the ground.
That's pants on the ground right there.
It is.
Really anxious to see what this 22 team does this year. I think they started to finally turn the corner and get some momentum back. Of course, it was well documented last year what happened at Richmond after they won that race and the issues with inspection. And then they just went on this terrible run. But I think Todd Gordon and this 22 team, Joey Logano, they finally started making some headway by Homestead, and I'm just curious to see if they can carry that momentum now to start the season off on a whole nother level. Vince?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Jeff. And I had a long conversation with Todd Gordon yesterday, and he talked about the fact how humbling it was for them. He said it was the toughest year that they'd ever had. He said the things that we had done and had worked for us in the past just weren't working for us anymore. And he says you have to challenge yourself to change what you know has been successful in the past to try to do something different to get better. And as you said, they did make progress toward the end of last season. But Todd Gordon told me yesterday, he said, this is a big weekend for us. We really need to get off on the right foot. It's going to be interesting to watch this 22 team this weekend and next.
Yeah, they got off to a great start last season.
Yeah.
8 top 10s in the first 9 races, but then only 9 top 10s the whole rest of the season.
Well, as Jeff said, it all started at Richmond when they left there and they had that word that we won't be using anymore, thank goodness, encumbered win. They just didn't seem to recover from that. They just never got their act back together.
There, a look at the top 5s and top 10s for Joey Logano last season.
Jeff, so if you bump draft a guy, now you're going to hit him in the spoiler. You're going to drive his spoiler up in the air. I can't.
On NASCAR Race Hub coming up after this one and only Clash practice. Then we'll have Daytona 500 qualifying practice, which is also practice for the dual races Thursday, 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Final practice for the duals. No practice Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So what are we likely to see next? We listen in on Denny Hamlin's team.
JGR draft. Get with our teammates, tell them we're ready. See if we can get more speed out of the thing. Just check clearances again. Probably 5 to 8 laps. Anybody talking about doing a bigger pack run between other teams?
Yeah, so I think the safe route right now would be stick with your teammates. Go out there and let's, this is new. I mean, that spoiler is down out of the air more than they've ever had it before. And I think keeping it small with the teams that you work with, gain some information. But then you heard Wheeler, he talked about, is there going to be a bigger draft? They do need to get into a bigger draft, but maybe not the first time they go out to try this out.
And one thing I noticed, I look in those cars, a head-on shot we were having of an 11 and 18 to 20 car. They are, body-wise, they are identical. Yes. Every aspect of those cars are absolutely the same. I noticed the windshield angles, the post. This is the same, this is the same, this is the same, this is the same. All that, I mean, everything's the same on all 3 of those cars. You know what? I think you're going to also see that's different this year, DW, because of the inspection process. That car is going to look like your Atlanta car. That's going to look like your Phoenix car. You're not going to see all these softened, rounded corners that you used to see for aerodynamic drag here at Daytona, and then see something completely opposite with sharp corners as we go to a downforce track. They're going to look very similar.
Larry, isn't this like we saw last year in practice where those Gibbs Toyotas didn't play well with others? They wanted to go out and just draft among themselves.
Well, obviously the 4th Joe Gibbs Toyota driver is not a part of the clash, Daniel Suarez in the 19. I'm sure they'd like to at least maybe have Martin Truex Jr. in the 78, but he's out there right now making single car runs, as you see him right there. So, yeah, I think if they could get 4 or 5, they'd be content to go out there and make a run, as you heard him say on the radio.
Now, Kyle Larson has the fastest lap of this session. He's run 19 laps, but we're going to see a little smoke here.
That looks like tire smoke to me coming off the left rear.
I think the tire was rubbing the deck lid. that's how I'm telling you, the whole tire's up inside the car. Goodness gracious. I mean, I love the way it looks. I think it's cool as heck. But I didn't think I'd ever see cars look quite like this at Daytona.
And Larry, these teams typically were able to clearance that left rear fender for a rub like this. Not able to really get away with that this year.
You can't do it. And I guess we need to quantify what is the biggest thing that has changed besides just saying no ride height. In the past here and at Talladega, NASCAR issued the rear springs. Everybody had 400-pound rear springs. Everybody had the same type of shock. Now that door is open. You can run whatever rear spring or rear shock package you want to run, track bar height, track bar rate. It's open just like it would be at any of the other racetracks.
Well, I think, Larry, that's something these teams have got to be careful with, because when you had those 400-pound rear springs, the car was pretty stable. The back stayed pretty stable. The shocks held the car where you needed it to be. Now the door is open, as you said. You better be careful what you put on the back of these cars if you don't want to get in trouble.
When I see these cars, I can't help but just go, low ride. I can't help it. It's in my mind.
Well, would you like to be out there one of those low riders, my friend?
I really like it up here with you guys. It's air conditioned, a little less hectic.
Put a little more cream in his coffee, will you?
We'll get you back to like 70s on 7. And who's that, War, that did Lowrider? That's a great song.
What is it good for?
Yeah. No. That's
another song. Well, that song was about. What, didn't they do that song? What is it good for?
No, that was the title of the song was for.
Hey guys, Martin Truex Jr. He came out to play with his Toyota buddies here in that 78 car.
I guess he was good with his clearances and came down pit road and said, "Let's go, boys."
He wanted to get his fluids warmed up before he got
all the way back now.
draft. This was when I'd be a little nervous right here, because
Edwin Starr did War.
Is that who did that?
Yeah. What is it good for?
What's it good for?
War did Lowrider.
That is close.
195.
Meanwhile, I only do things like that to check you out.
Now, there's no doubt in my mind this group is going to go to the top of the timing board. They're getting after it now. 194.
So last year in Clash practice,
all the way back.
191.5. Single car runs 196 in the draft in practice for last year's Clash.
Normal deal, Adam, about 2 and swap.
Didn't really hear any discussion of swapping. I think it's more just getting up to speed, 5 to 8, and then come back and adjust travel.
There they go.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Fastest lap increased, or rather dropped by more than a second. 45.75, Kyle Busch.
That's trucking, boys. 196, almost 197 miles an hour.
And this lap's going to be even faster.
Should be better.
You saw Casey Kane behind in the 95. New look for him this year. New team. Tried to latch onto this group, but wasn't able to.
No.
The Grateful Dead. Trucking. You know, with the Doodah Man. And I'm sorry, I thought you were still doing song titles.
Up on Bourbon. Yeah, I know that song. I don't know who did.
Well, this is the song of speed right here. 45.75 last lap. 45.45.
Almost 198 miles per hour.
Well, now that's the last car in line. Martin Truex doing a little suck up to the pack between the stripe and coming around to the stripe.
Yeah, if you remember when we had group qualifying that one year, whoever was the last car in line, that was going to be the fastest.
That's right.
We're going to finish this lap, Martin. Going into turn 1, 11's going to go high. We'll run just a couple more laps.
Yeah, so basically what they want to do, they want to feel what it's like to be out front like Denny Hamlin is right now. Now he's going to go high as they get into turn 1 and finish this lap, and he's going to get in back to the back of this line where Truex is. He wants to see how his car drives different, being further back in that more turbulent air.
Yeah, and you see who's the fastest too. You know, that 18 car might be faster out front.
78's the last one.
Well, Hamlin was fastest that lap out front, and we're down to 45.35.
198.
Clear behind.
Drop down, latch onto that draft, and this, if you don't coordinate that properly and get down into that pocket of air that's coming off those 3 cars, there's a good chance you could lose the draft. But it looks like he's starting to get that momentum back.
Oh yeah, that thing started to come alive down the back straightaway. He was pulling right up to him.
So now we're 2 miles an hour faster than we were in practice last year.
And that's only 4 cars.
Right.
Pull it back up to you here. You just one tight now. Same distance amongst the ones in front of you here.
199 going into turn 1.
Piece of cake.
A near 200-mile-per-hour draft at Daytona. That's what early spring is all about. 3 veterans and Eric Jones, who comes to Joe Gibbs Racing from Furniture Row, where he got his rookie stripes last year and now replaces Matt Kenseth in the number 20. He's the defending Rookie of the Year, but we see bright things ahead for this young man from Michigan.
I really feel good about him in that car, and he went to school last year. I think he learned a lot last year driving the 77 car, and I think he's got a car this year that I'm going to say this kid can win 2 or 3 races. I really feel good about him. He's got, you know what I like about him? He's got a quiet confidence. He's for a young guy his age, he's just really very confident.
And look at this progression. Rookie of the Year in trucks, in Xfinity, and in the Cup Series. Now he's ready to win.
I think so.
When you say confidence, DW, I mean, because of this progression. I mean, I'm sure he won races before he ever got into a stock in NASCAR. But since he's come to NASCAR, just constantly building on those stats, those win columns, Rookie of the Year, building top 5s, top 10s. And I agree with you. He's in the right team at the right time to go start to get those wins.
Well, another thing that's new on that team is the crew chief, Chris Gale. Came with Eric Jones from Furniture Row.
11's clear.
Jason Ratcliffe stays with JGR.
All 4 back in line. All 4 back in line. That's the one car you see him up there in front of you there. All back in line here now.
But moves to the Xfinity Series.
I'm really curious to see if Kyle Larson can latch on to this group of 4. We saw earlier they blew right by him. He didn't quite have the timing right. Lost the draft. He waited, stayed out on the track, slowed down, and waited for them to come by. And now he's trying to latch on. I don't know. He's right in that pocket where those guys are really getting after it right now and carrying some good speed. And I haven't seen anybody be able to really latch onto that draft yet.
Yeah, Jeff, every time they swap, he gets a little closer.
Yeah, when
every time they mix it up.
They made the swap that time, he gained a bunch.
But I think that's important to note because on this last lap, he was a 10th slower than the pack. He's not close enough to close the draft.
I don't think so.
Cars have linked up in a draft, practicing for the Clash. Casey Kane goes to number 2 on the speed chart in his new ride, the number 95, along with Kyle Larson, now 3rd, and Ryan Blaney 4th. Fords and Chevys together.
Well, if you think about Casey Kane, really no alliances there, right? It's all about just getting in a pack, learning as much as you can.
Casey Kane moves from Hendrick Motorsports to Levine Family Racing, single car team. Take a look back at his NASCAR career. 9 wins for Ray Evernham. Moved to Richard Petty Motorsports, scored 2 more. At Red Bull Racing, 1 checkered flag. And then for Rick Hendrick, 6 wins, including at Brickyard last year.
You know, we talked about the Toyotas, 4 Toyotas that were out there. We were really curious to see what 6 cars could do, even though they're different manufacturers in this group, Fords and Chevrolet. And what did they do? To the top of the board. That just goes to show you what 2 extra cars will do.
That's 199 miles an hour. That's a couple of miles an hour faster than what the Toyotas were.
Now just think about what's going to happen with 17
Get
of
them all out there together. Woohoo!
Looks like Jimmy Johnson, Chad Canal said, all right, made enough single car runs. Let's go get out there in that draft.
Well,
I think they're really focused this year, especially in this race, how to build confidence, build a car that's driving well, and get in the draft in practice to try to find out those things that maybe they've been missing.
When they were a dominant team, a dominant car like they had been in the past, I think going out all by yourself might have been okay. But when you get a little bit behind, you got to learn. Every time you go on the track, you need to come back with some new information, things that we need to do to the car to make it better in the race, because they have 0 luck in the race. So a lot of times think it's because they rode around by themselves too much.
So I'm wondering, was the speed differential between the pack and Johnson too great for him to tuck in, or are they just still working on their single car runs?
No, I think he's trying to latch onto this group. But I think you have 6 cars, 6 or 7 cars actually now it's only going to make it harder to catch up to that group if they're single file, because they're just carrying more momentum and more speed. Vince?
Yeah, in fact, Chad Canales had come over the radio and told Jimmy Johnson to get in the draft, so I'd expect Jimmy to get in that there in the 48. As far as the 42 of Kyle Larson's concerned, I was a little surprised today when I was talking to Kyle before practice. They had done the test out in Las Vegas, and he said that the new Camaro didn't feel any different to him than the previous version. He said, I just get in and drive it, but he said it didn't feel any different to him. I was a little bit surprised by that, and there's Larson doing some double duty, having some fun this week down in Florida, driving the wing sprint car over at Volusia while he's here for Daytona. He can't drive the sprint car when he's going to be in the Cup car the next day, so on Sunday, he'll get in the wing sprint car because there's no Cup duty on Monday.
I say I'm not that surprised at those comments from Larson, because we'll get into this when we get to Atlanta and the downforce tracks like Las Vegas where they tested, but there's a different front splitter on the cars this year. So actually, if you took apples to apples, took the old car and put that splitter and some of the new things that are happening this year with inspection, that car is going to have less downforce. So I think that tells me maybe the Camaro is a gain, that it's feeling the same as what the car from last year did, because it actually, should technically have things on it that make less downforce.
Well, if I had a car that I really liked and I thought it might be a little bit better, I probably wouldn't admit it. I'd probably kind of keep that to myself, knowing that I got a better car than I had in the past, but I sure don't want to go around bragging about it because we haven't even raced yet.
Well, that's what I was going to add to that, is from what I heard from the Las Vegas test is he had a lot to brag about. They were very fast.
Yeah, I think so. So, when you're sitting on something, you just kind of keep it to yourself.
$18 minutes to go in this practice. Kyle Larson has run the most laps of anybody in this session. Boy, there's a group in the light blue shirt. That's Dale Inman, Richard Petty's cousin. And in the black T-shirt, that is Paul Menard, new driver for the Wood brothers. Len Wood there. Talking with Paul as he keeps a close eye on Clash practice. We'll see him in the next practice session along with all the Daytona 500 drivers, many of whom have new rides for this year. Right in that pack, that number 17, Ricky Stenhouse, he was doing a lot of celebrating last night. There's always a lot of racing that goes on in and around Daytona. The modifieds will be at New Smyrna later in the week, but last night out at Volusia County Speedway in Barberville, out Route 40 from Ormond Beach, Sheldon Hodenschild, second-generation driver, drove Stenhouse's sprint car to a World of Outlaws win.
Wow, congratulations. That's a big win. That's a great way to get the season started. We saw Paul Menard standing up on top of the truck watching. I guarantee you there's a lot of drivers that are not in the Clash watching what's happening right now. Especially, this is the most formed up pack that we've seen yet, where they're side by side in the corners on the straightaway, where we're going to really see how these cars are handling in a draft similar to what we're going to see tomorrow in the Clash.
Yeah, this little group right here has been real aggressive, Jeff. I've been watching them moving around a lot. They've been chasing back and forth. Pretty aggressive bunch of guys right here.
Blaney's had enough. He's pulling off.
Kurt Busch and Brad Keselowski up front. Logano on the outside in yellow. Jimmy Johnson black. New colors for the Lowe's Chevy. That number 9, that's Elliott. Chase, not Bill. And Ricky Stenhouse in blue. Casey Kane is the caboose in this train for the moment.
Little side draft
Keselowski go up there, get a little side draft.
They're hauling down on Kevin Harvick in the 4. Here's the view from his back bumper.
Well, the best thing that could happen to Kevin is them running side by side. When they're single file, it's so hard to catch that draft and get in line and be able to keep the momentum up or gain that momentum from the draft. But when they're side by side like this, it definitely slows them down. It's going to make it a little bit easier for Kevin Harvick to get in there.
Now, this is the only practice session for the Clash. Larry, an hour and 20 minutes of practice today. Last year, we had almost 2 hours of practice for the Clash. Is it that big a difference?
I think last year, it's probably a lot more than the crew chiefs wanted. But talking to a lot of crew chiefs over the last few weeks, talking to Mike Wheeler, Todd Gordon, They wish they had a little bit more. But I think the big difference we're going to see in these next 2 one-hour sessions is the fact that they're going to be working on race trim as well as qualifying trim, because it's an impound after qualifying for the dual races on Thursday. So they're still going to be adding to their data bank.
You know, Larry, I have been totally impressed with how good these cars look like they're handling it. I mean, it's a hot afternoon here. Hot morning, sun's out, track's kind of slick. These guys are all look like their cars are handling pretty darn good right now.
Kevin Harvick picks up the draft with 12 minutes to go in Clash practice. On the finish of the one and only practice for tomorrow's Clash at Daytona. 17 drivers will square off, chasing the first NASCAR checkered flag of Speedweeks 2018. You'll see it on FS1 tomorrow, 2 Eastern Time, right after Daytona 500 qualifying on Fox.
All right, driver Mike, we got the car pretty good. Now the driver's got to start working on his game. He's got to start thinking about, how am I going to win these? How am I going to win that Clash? And that's when it's a thinking man's game when it gets down to the end of these things. Be in the right place, right time, have a good race car, make the right move.
Yeah, step 1 is get the car driving good. Do we have the speed? Is step 2. And then step 3 is, all right, strategically, what can I do? You saw Brad Keselowski right there, took an opportunity. Jimmy kind of poked his nose to the outside of Kyle Busch, and what did Keselowski do? He took the opposite line, got to the left rear quarter panel of Jimmy Johnson and made that pass. So that's what they're doing now, exactly what you're saying, DW. Now they're making moves to see, can I make that stick, and will that work tomorrow?
Yeah, I love that Dale Jr. and Dale Sr. really, and you a little bit as well. Kind of, we go out and practice. You lay back a little bit and see how long it took you to run down that leader and get into the lead. If it took you 5 laps, 2 laps, ever how long. So you had that in your bank when you got ready, when the race started.
Well, if I'm Brad Keselowski, I'm wondering right now, how do I pass a fast Toyota? Joe Gibbs Racing has won 3 of the last 4 clashes. The one they didn't win, Denny Hamlin was leading at the white flag prior to contact with Brad Keselowski.
I always love it when you've got Kyle Busch leading this pack and he's waving off. He doesn't want you to actually pass him.
Right.
He saw some moves you made. He's like, yeah, I'm pretty good out here. I think it's a good time for me to pull off.
Yeah, he doesn't like to be passed.
You always want to pull off when you're leading.
But I do appreciate that he's waving off turn 2, going down the back. Hey, I'm backing out. I'm coming in. That's very important.
And the other boys took their ball and went home too. They said, you don't want to play? All right, we're not playing anymore either.
But I will say, Keselowski was looking pretty sporty right there. I like some of the aggressive moves he was making.
Well, now look at the speed chart, because the top 4 are all
Where those Fords
blue
come
ovals.
from?
Yeah, they're all right at the top.
And look at the guys that were fast in the earlier. Where are they?
The Chevrolets.
They're at the bottom.
Well, that'll happen.
Guys, you were talking about step 1, step 2, and step 3. I'm working on step 4. This is a 75-lap race with a caution to lap 25. We're going to go back racing somewhere probably 45 to 46 to go. The fuel window is about 44 to 48 laps. I think the fuel mileage is going to be a little better with this package, because actually the drag is a little better the way they've got the cars running. So that's one thing I want to make sure I'm looking at right here.
But is faster speeds going to be more fuel? Don't you think by running the speeds they're going to be running, especially that big draft? I mean, yeah, if you're further back, you can conserve a little bit of that throttle and not use as much. But if you're up front leading, I'm wondering what that fuel mileage is going to be. Very interesting, especially where that caution comes out at 25.
Leave it to Larry Mack to wonder the day before the race, can I go the distance on fuel? We're going to be wondering all tomorrow afternoon, aren't we? 3.5 minutes to go in practice for tomorrow's Clash on FS1. Looks like Denny Hamlin is done. The 3 Joe Gibbs cars and Martin Truex all drafted together a bit earlier. They now are 8th through 11th on the speed chart. Jamie McMurray out for a couple final laps.
Saw a couple of guys, Mike, kind of fine-tuning. You talk about getting down to the last minute, checking their pit road speed. Came down pit road to be sure they had their speed right.
Sure if Ryan Blaney is repositioning or going out for a final run, or maybe just practicing K-turns for his next driver test. Kyle Larson, 5th fastest. He has led the Chevrolet contingent through this entire practice. Pretty much.
Well, he led the Chevrolet contingent all of last year, 2017.
And he did at Vegas in the test. So, yeah, he's always somebody got to keep an eye on.
Just had our second speeding penalty of this practice. Kurt Busch in the early minutes of practice, and now Ryan Newman too fast down pit road.
What happens, Mike, is you're trying to catch a car or a group of cars. So you're speeding down pit road, and obviously NASCAR doesn't like that.
Watching these cars skewed like we just see there with Newman. You know, I really didn't expect to see them skewed that direction, because that's going to actually take drag off the car and make the car run a little bit faster. But you would think handling is going to be pretty important, especially being a day race for the Clash. But looks like they're going to get pretty aggressive with it and see how it does work out for the Clash. Maybe learn something for the duels next week.
I just think these guys are so comfortable with this no ride height. I mean, they run it everywhere but Daytona and Talladega have for, you know, last couple of years. They've come. I haven't seen anybody look like they're out of control. Every car looks like it's very stable. They move around. I don't see them jumping sideways or anything. I think these guys are really happy with what they got.
I'm not sure what Blaney's up to here. Looks like he's not completely up to speed as he comes around. A minute to go in this practice. He'll have time for at least one hot lap.
Yeah, sometimes a crew chief or even the engine tuner or somebody say, we just need to get a lap in. We want to take a look at something.
Could be a small packer change or something just for the heights. Oh, no, he wants to come to pit road.
Pit road speed.
Pit road speed, all right.
There you go.
I think that's smart. I think that's really smart. Pit road entry here can be pretty tricky, and it's an important aspect of the race. Matt?
And Jeff, they were going to try to go out and run at least one lap, but they've run out of time. They called the audible and told him to work on his pit road speed, much like his teammate, the 2 of Keselowski, trying to close out this practice session.
Well, there's two things happening there. There's entry to pit road, where you're going to try to brake as late as possible, go down through the gears, get to pit road speed. And then there's the running pit road speed all the way down this long pit road, and how you hold it at that specific RPM that they've targeted, and also, you know, how close they are to that margin of error.
And to fans who say, well, why don't you just put a button that'll cruise control the drivers down pit road like Formula One and other series? Well, why would you want to do that? The object is to drive the car. Let the driver drive it.
That's
and
why
make him drive it.
And that's why we have 5 lug nuts on the wheels also instead of 1.
That's right. The King, Richard Petty, in the garage.
Car Race Hub kicks off the 2018 season with an action-packed week. First, we'll recap the Clash at Daytona and talk with a great American race pole winner. NASCAR's best stop by for Daytona 500 Media Day, and we'll be all access all weekend long with Eric Amarola doing his first on-track activities with Stuart Haas. All this and more on NASCAR Race Hub, Monday and Tuesday, 6 to 7 p.m., and a special double dose on Wednesday, only on FS1.
Flash practice now complete. Teams use the same garage stalls and hauler parking. That's the Daytona 500 car for Austin Dillon being rolled into the garage, as the Clash car will get put away until tomorrow. Fords ended up with the fastest laps in practice. The top 4, Kyle Larson Chevy and Casey Kane's, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, and then the Toyotas led by Kyle Busch in 8th. So that is your only practice session for the Clash. What'd you learn? Are you ready?
I'm happy.
Okay.
My car drove well. I was able to lead the pack around there. Got to do a little drafting. Got to go down pit road, check my pit road speed. I'm happy.
I don't know, DW. When I see close to 200-mile-per-hour drafts in practice, I don't think they're going to have. I think they're going to have their hands full tomorrow. I think to make that bold, wild move that you're going to have to make to win this race, I think that you're going to see some cars stepping out, and we're going to see some action.
We put them all back in the hauler. They're all still rolling, so I'm pretty happy.
All 17 of them, that's right. So they are set for the Clash tomorrow. We'll be back in 1 hour with Cup practice for 500 qualifying. Now to John Roberts.